Should a private organization be forced by the government to tell its customers about products it doesn't offer? That's exactly what the New York City Council wants to do. Listen to this. It's considering legislation that would force private pro-life medical clinics to tell their pregnant patients about abortion options. Options that, of course, pro-life clinics don't offer. This does not sit well with my next guest, who argues that such a requirement is a serious and profound violation of free speech rights by forcing a pro-choice message on a pro-life organization. Here now is Queens Republican City Councilman Dan Halloran. Congressman Halloran, welcome to Freedom Watch.
Judge,
I couldn't believe this when I saw it. What does the City Council of the City of New York and the mayor, who's an on-again, off-again, on-again, off-again Republican, really want to do?
Look, this bill will do three things. First, it will compel speech inside these crisis pregnancy centers. It will take not-for-profits who receive absolutely no funding, no money from the city or state of New York, and require them to put up signs that indicate they don't provide abortion services, they don't provide contraception, and they are not going to refer you to agencies or organizations that do. That's one.
Right.
Number two, it's going to create a criminal penalty that if you refuse to comply with the orders of the Department of Consumer Affairs in regards to this, you can be imprisoned up to 6 months for violating these orders.
The doctors and the nurses that run these clinics, the clinics we're talking about are places where women go for counseling and health services to have babies.
That's correct.
Not to abort the baby.
That's correct. These crisis pregnancy centers are designed around the model that everybody is pushing the agenda of abortion. And as you know, 41% of all pregnancies in New York City end in an abortion. In our minority communities, that number is 60%.
Wow.
60% of all pregnancies.
All right. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech.
That's
Every
right.
school child knows that line.
Yeah.
But the Supreme Court has interpreted it to mean Congress can't force you to speak. It can't force you to defend yourself. It can't force you to utter words that you don't want to utter. So how does the City Council of the Big Apple claim that it can defy the First Amendment?
It doesn't care. And in fact, I pointed out, and at the hearings I pointed out, that a similar law in Maryland had been struck down by the federal courts there as unconstitutional for the very same reason. And that court was dealing with a much narrower issue. There was just signage in Maryland. Here, it's speech. If you pick up the phone at the crisis pregnancy center, you have to tell them, we don't provide abortions, we don't provide referrals for birth control.
Is this a war on the pro-life movement in the city of New York by the abortionists who run the government?
It's a war against the not-for-profits who are in turn sponsored by many of our Christian organizations, whether it's the Catholic Church, the Evangelical Christians. All of them are out there doing this without government funding again on the good works that they're doing, and we're being told, no, that's not good enough.
Well, how can the government wage war on a perfectly legitimate, I mean, what could be more legitimate than an organization that raises tax-free dollars to care for the maternal health of poor women that want to deliver their babies? And the city of New York is trying to shut them down.
It's a twist of the argument. What they're trying to do is turn it on its head and call the people who are for these crisis pregnancy centers anti-women. You know, this is a typical tactic of speech they don't want out there. You know, it's great, freedom of speech, only so far as the speech that they like is being spoken.
I would think if this passes, and I guess it's probably going to pass. I mean, how many Republicans are with you on the City Council in New York?
Look, all 5 members of the Republican delegation are against this bill. But in addition to that, we've been joined by a nominal group of conservative Democrats who say this just goes too far. Unfortunately, we wouldn't be having a vote on Wednesday if the Speaker didn't feel she'd lined up the votes.
All right, so this passes on Wednesday. A federal judge will enjoin it on Thursday, I would suspect.
I know that several of these crisis pregnancy centers have already lined up legal counsel. They're talking about it. They're going to use the federal decision in Maryland as their basis. This is an assault on the First Amendment. This is an assault on separation of powers. This is the government telling a religious group what to do. And they tried to fake it. They said that people would be confused when they walked into these centers and think that they're about getting these other services. Bridge to Life, Sisters of Life. They're not confusing.
There's no
confusion. But Planned Parenthood provides no parenting services, and that's not confusing.
Dan Halloran, it's a pleasure to have you. You're always welcome here. Thanks very
Joe.
much. The Obamacare waiver madness is just beginning. In addition to companies and unions, states might be able to opt out of Obamacare too. Is this a sign that Obamacare itself is on cardiac arrest? My freedom fighters are on that one next. President Obama on Monday backed a significant change to the health care reform law by supporting a plan that could delay implementation of the unpopular mandate to buy insurance. The president said states should be able to request waivers to implement alternatives to the law starting in 2014, 3 years earlier than the current law allows. This has my freedom fighters wondering if unions, employers, and now states can opt out of the health care reform. Does this law have any teeth at all? Joining me now are Fox Business Network's Countdown to the Closing Bell anchor and my Fox Business colleague Liz Claman, Suffolk University economics professor Benjamin Powell, and Mike Norman, chief economist at John Thomas Financial. All right, Mike, we'll start with you. We're longtime friends, even though we disagree on so many of these things. What do you think of a law that lets the president decide against whom it shall be enforced and who shall be relieved of the burdens?
Yeah, well, I think you and I actually agree on this one. This was a bad law. This was unimplementable. I mean, you can't. How do you come up with a law and say, anyone with pre-existing conditions, I mean, people could just get sick and then sign up for insurance, and then what? They're going to pay a fine, but it's going to be a lot less than the premium. How do you shift $500 billion from Medicare to insurance companies and suggest that that somehow is, a law that helps everybody out? It's unimplementable, and I think it's starting to break down.
Then what would health care be like in a truly free market? Where would we go to get it, and what would the costs like, and would it be for-profit or non-profit?
I think this is an important point, Judge, because a lot of people assume that our market in healthcare was failing before. We have a very heavily regulated health market before this Obamacare came in. So we need to do things like get rid of insurance mandates that mandate particular coverages that must be included in packages so that people could pick for like bare bones insurance just for catastrophic injuries instead of lumping in chiropractic, in vitro fertilization, or any number of other things that jack up the rates for people. We have to work on ending the monopoly grip that the AMA holds over the process of dictating who can practice what type of medicine, and let nurse practitioners do a whole lot more. So ending the occupational licensure that prevents entry into medicine. Doing things to decrease the cost of drugs. We have an FDA approval process that now takes about 10 years and $1 billion to get through. All of these types of reforms are moves towards markets that would lower the cost of health care for Americans.
What does business think of the fact that one corporation has to comply with this and another corporation doesn't? Well, does it appear as though these are political decisions when the president lets 900 corporations, labor unions, and other groups out of the restraints imposed by the law?
It's not political. You look at the diverse companies. Some are very small. There was a boat maker with just a couple of employees to gigantic companies that have hundreds and hundreds of employees. But you talk about does it have any teeth anymore? It's been losing bicuspid since the second they started to allow these waivers. So yes, it is a flawed bill, but my dad was a surgeon, and it was the insurance companies and the lawyers who ruined health care. He always said, that's what the issue. We needed to get tort reform in here. There are good aspects that suddenly some Americans are warming up to.
I think I do admit it, but I think where he went off course, what should have been rolled out, I think, was Medicare basically for everybody else who's not covered. That's a program that has worked for years and years and years, and he backed away from the single payer option. That's what his base wanted him to do.
You liberals don't like the fact that he backed away from the single payer.
Don't label me, okay? Liberal, conservative. I mean, I go with what I think is a rational.
You're in favor of the government running health care. That's not liberal. What is it, socialist?
It ran Medicare, and it ran it very, very well.
How could anybody say that Medicare and Medicaid are run well, Ben Powell? They're disasters. They cost 100 times more what LBJ predicted they would cost in 1965.
The costs are running out of control, and those in the end are going to dwarf the Social Security costs we have. We can't keep expanding government control and financing over medicine. We need to move towards markets. That hasn't been on the political table, and it's not something that's been on the economic table under medicine for a long time here.
What frustrates me is that the president, whether he did the right thing or the wrong thing, has the power under the statute to decide against whom it's enforced and against whom it is not enforced. That is the type of king-like discretion that we don't give to governors and presidents. His duty is to uphold the law, all the law, whether it stings or whether it comes.
Where does this law go, Judge? I mean, if you can opt out of it with the waivers, which of course now we're at 900 of these companies that can opt out, that makes you wonder, well then, why did we put this together? Right. And so now the question is, how will it morph, how will it change? But allowing this broadens the president's
Does big insurance like this statute, does this make more business for them?
Of course it does. You're transferring $1 trillion to private insurance companies.
Their stocks are at 52
yeah,
highs.
I mean, that, right there, that's a testament to whether or not they like it right there. I think they like it
so
a lot.
You would agree with You'd agree with those who argue that big business is in bed with the government on this one, the Gasparino argument.
They lobbied very, very heavily to have the law pass in the form that it passed, and they're huge beneficiaries, money-wise.
All right, we're going to get it more into your bailiwick now. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York President William Dudley is giving a very sunny outlook on the United States economy's recovery in response to reports showing more active consumer spending and a decrease in unemployment claims. So, does that mean the Federal Reserve should stop its $600 billion cash printing? I know they don't actually print the cash, they do it digitally. Scheme that foolishly believes would stimulate the economy? Go.
Well, first of all, I just find it kind of humorous that they're first now catching on that the economy is doing better, right? It's been a year and a half that things have been getting better, and that's mostly because of the fiscal stimulus. Quantitative easing and the lowering of interest rates, there's no direct channel to real demand in the economy. I mean, you just don't see that. It was the fiscal stimulus. But let me just say this. They didn't see the crisis coming. They have a terrible track record of forecasting these things. And where we can see spending cuts being implemented, which is what's coming here, we see a contraction. So they're ignoring the possibility of that.
Surely you don't accept that, Professor Powell, that spending cuts will produce a contraction rather than an expansion of private investment.
No, this is the fairy tale world of fictional macroeconomics. What we had here was a microeconomic problem that manifests itself throughout the macroeconomy. We have a problem where everybody recognizes there was a housing and financial bubble that misallocated resources. The process of correction means making those businesses that misinvested go bankrupt, reallocating labor and capital to other sectors. Fiscal stimulus packages and bailouts are fundamentally about keeping those scarce resources in the wrong lines of industry. That slows down and prevents recovery. We're seeing recovery now because the insanity of the repeated fiscal stimuluses and bailouts of both the Bush and Obama administration have finally stopped. We're getting a bit of gridlock. Entrepreneurs are sorting things out. This is good.
Got it. Central planning has never worked, except in the short run and for those to whom the benefit was directly aimed. In the long run, we all pay for it.
In the long run, we should have allowed things to fail and go under, except that you would hear major complaining and fetching, Judge. The fact is that since QE2, $600 billion put in over the summer, the S&P, the Dow, the NASDAQ up 20%. I mean, the people look at their 401ks, they look so much healthier, and they are much more appreciative of that. But put that aside, put the markets aside. The Institute for Supply Management numbers, at best numbers since 2004, we're getting economic data that's better than 1988.
Does Ben Does Ben Bernanke think that unemployment is not a problem that he should worry about, that this is a jobless recovery and therefore he can grow?
Listen, he constantly states that, the unemployment rate is too high, but there's very little that the Fed can do. The only policy tool that the Fed has is the setting of interest rates, and there's no direct transmission mechanism from that to creating jobs. But the fairy tale, if there is a fairy tale here, like the good professor said, I guess he's living in fairyland, because we went from a negative 6% collapse in the economy to a 3% growth rate. We've seen the stock market almost double. We've seen the economic output grow by 800 billion. Liz, the cars that were created are an illusion. They're not real. The real asset, the software, the computers that were created around it, yeah, it's real.
Of course it's real, or is it an illusion? Because the government bought it, the government doesn't charge them taxes.
Are the cars an illusion? Are we not really driving them? Are they just a figment of our imagination?
All right, we gotta go. We're out of time. We'll have you both back. Ben Powell, Mike Norman, Liz Claman, thank you for joining us. The plain truth on tackling the nation's debt crisis. Mike Norman's not going to like it, but you will next.